Sometimes you don't need to buy a car that is the fastest, sexiest looking machine on four wheels, and you just need reliable transport to get you from A to B that won't break the bank. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Toyota Corolla Ascent Sport Hybrid. The Corolla is one of the best-selling cars in history. They've sold over 50 million of them across 12 generations, and the combination of reliability, good performance and keen pricing has kept this car on top for decades. But the one thing they lack, at least as far as I'm concerned, is desirability. This latest Corolla wears a bit more of a scowl than a smile, but I think it's actually quite an attractive design with these angular lights. We get the blue Toyota logo here, signifying that this car is at least partially electric, and a big grille down the front here for it to breathe. But one thing I have noticed are these blanked out fog lights here. Side on, and you can see this design is a bit more interesting than the Kia Cerato, but where a lot of car makers have sort of morphed their hatchbacks into more coupe or wagon forms, Toyota have stuck with a bit more of a traditional hatchback shape, and that comes at the expense of practicality, which is a bit of a shame. This entry-level model also scores 16-inch, rather plain-looking alloy wheels. The rear of the Corolla, it takes a bit of a cascading sort of form, and it comes down to this big bumper here, which sort of forms a bit of a lip, which would be actually quite easy to scratch if you're loading something heavy into the boot. Not that you're going to have much room to put anything too big in the boot, because there's only a 217 litre storage space down here. Under the flat floor, we get a space-saver spare tyre. Underneath the bonnet is a pretty busy engine bay. Here we've got a 1.8 litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder petrol engine that outputs 72 kilowatts of power and 142 newton meters of torque. That's mated to an electric motor. These two engines switch on and off depending on the conditions. Combined fuel economy is very good at just 4.2 litres per 100 kilometres. Inside, and while the design is attractive and contains many familiar Toyota design cues, I tell you, a lot of plastics died to make this interior, because there is hard, scratchy plastic everywhere, especially here on the doors. It feels especially cheap, and with the door lever here, it just feels pretty cheap and nasty. We get some softer touch material up here on top, but this is an entry-level model, and you do kind of get what you pay for. At 8 inches, the center console screen is a good size, but unfortunately it has Toyota's slightly disappointing software on it, which really does feel like it's a whole generation behind what rivals like Hyundai, Kia and Mazda are currently doing. And I mean, just look at these maps. They look like something that my son's Year 3 class would have drawn, and you have to pay extra to get them. Sat-nav and digital radio do not come standard with this car. If I were you, I would just stick with your phone's maps instead. Climate controls are integrated into the dash just underneath that, and they look pretty good. Then moving down, we've got a weird little compartment here for your phone and a USB plug just up here on the left next to that. It took me quite a while to find where that was. I was beginning to think this car didn't have one, but it's hidden away just there. Next to that, we've got some drive mode buttons. The EV mode button, which allows you to drive this car in full electric mode while there is sufficient charge in the battery, but as soon as you put your foot down beyond a gentle caress, the petrol motor kicks back in, so it really only works at low speed. The drive mode selector gives you access to the drive modes of Eco, Normal and Power. The gear shifter has an additional B mode on it, which allows this car to use some of the electricity generated from engine braking, although unlike a normal electric car where you can drive with just one pedal and get a lot of charge from engine braking, here it is very mild, so you will need to use the normal brake to slow down. The instrument cluster is a nice combination of digital and analog. It actually looks pretty good. There's some additional information you can scroll through on the LCD screen on the right-hand side here, which is all pretty interesting. The steering wheel, I think this is actually the very first steering wheel I've reviewed in a car that doesn't have some sort of a leather or fake leather wrap around it. It's just an old school plastic wheel. I mean, it feels fine, and I hadn't actually noticed that until my camera guy Jason pointed it out just then, so it's quite a nice wheel, and the buttons on it feel pretty good. The seating position is, well, fairly low in the cabin, but there's not a lot of visibility out the front. I mean, I can't see the front of the bonnet at all because it just drops away altogether. Even though the seats are cloth and this probably isn't the world's most expensive material, these seats are actually pretty comfortable. There's good support, and you know, I could picture myself spending a fair amount of time in them. I would love it if there was some lumbar support, but you can't have it all. Back seat of the Corolla. Getting in behind my own seating position. I'm 190 centimeters tall and it's a bit tight. It's noticeably smaller than the Honda Civic or the Kia Cerato, with my knees pretty firmly into the back of the seat in front of me. Headroom not too great either. My hair is touching the ceiling. It's actually quite dark back here because of all the dark plastic and the dark headliner. A sunroof would really lighten things up a bit, I'm sure. In terms of backseat amenities, well, there's not a lot to talk about. There's a little bench here, but there's no USBs or air vents for the air conditioning, and we do get 2 cup holders in the armrest and an additional cup holder here in the door, but that's pretty much it. It does get very quiet in here when you're stopped at the lights. Everything just turns off. Just the sound of air rushing through the air conditioning vents. And then as you put your foot on the accelerator, there's a bit of electric engine noise. And then the petrol engine kicks in once you hit about 25 kilometers an hour. And that's actually quite noisy when it first comes on. Being a CVT, it doesn't make the nicest noise. It just sort of gets louder and higher pitched as you go, and it's a bit unrelenting. But actually, there is plenty of power. It doesn't feel underpowered. The electric motor and the petrol engine running together actually produces a decent amount of power, more than enough for around town. But I do have to say, I think this is about the most anonymous car you can drive. No one looks twice, and people don't really let you in traffic either. The 16-inch wheels with their big fat tyres actually make for quite a smooth ride. I can't really complain about the ride quality at all. It's very comfortable. And the steering feels pretty good too. It's nice and direct, doesn't feel too numb or too light. It's pretty good. The Toyota Corolla is undoubtedly a very easy car to live with. It's just not very exciting. One thing I forgot to mention is that there is an information screen here on the center console screen that actually shows you how power is being transferred around the car, from the battery to the electric motor, and how the petrol engine can charge the battery when you're decelerating. It's really interesting to look at, almost distracting in fact. This car has adaptive cruise control, which is actually quite a nice thing to have in an entry-level model. We've just pulled up at the lights here and the car has stopped by itself a good distance from the car in front. I didn't have to touch the brake or anything. And that's actually quite a rarity to see in any car in an entry-level model. And this car also comes with the Toyota Sense safety system, so it is actually really well equipped as far as safety gear goes. Only things missing, as I mentioned before, are parking sensors. There are none at all, which is a little bit irritating, and there's no rear cross traffic alert either. One other small function that's missing, which I really like, automatic windscreen wipers. Toyota is one of the world's best car brands, and there's no questioning this car's build quality or reliability. You know that this Corolla is still going to be going strong when humans have gone the way of the dinosaurs, but its smaller size and average warranty and horrible infotainment system do make it a slightly less attractive proposition than some of its Korean rivals. Now, don't get me wrong, this car is everything you want and more. You should really add it to your small car test drive shortlist, but just be prepared to be wowed by some of its rivals.